I rise to support the motion that the Legislative Council notes the centenary of the election of the first woman, Edith Cowan, in the Australian Parliament, and that the Legislative Council acknowledges the significant progress of the status of women in the West Australian Parliament, and in particular in the Legislative Council since Edith Cowan's election, and recognises the important journey ahead to achieve further equality. Shortly after I was elected to the Legislative Council, but before I was sworn in, we attended some training in Perth, a lot of which I have to confess at the time sounded a bit like gobbledygook. It was information overload, and until you're actually on the ground and participating in these things, not a lot of it makes a great deal of sense. But we participated in this training, and at the end of one of these sessions I decided to reward myself with an ice cream, which is one of life's little pleasures. So I went down to one of my favourite ice cream shops in Perth, and I sat down in there, and it's filled with young people, and sitting alongside me were two young women. And these two young women were engrossed in their conversation, and I must confess I'm quite fond of listening to people's conversations. I don't know if that's if that's something I should confess to, but I find my fellow human beings fascinating. I'm always interested in what interests them and what they're talking about. So I was sitting listening to these young people. I work with young people, so I'm always really interested to know what drives them, what interests them. And these young ladies who were sitting next to me, also enjoying their ice cream, were talking about their important journey ahead. And they were talking about their careers and their subject choices and where they might be heading for the future. And these young women were talking about how they'd like to enter politics, how they'd love to be entering politics, and they were talking about the different parties and the things that they'd like to achieve if they were in politics. And I have to confess it was the most delicious ice cream I have ever consumed, because I was sitting there listening to these young women talking about politics as though it was a genuine, unfettered opportunity for them. It never even crossed their minds that there would be some sort of roadblock or something standing in their way that would prevent them from this being a choice for them. That is the legacy of 100 years since Edith Cowan was elected. All the women that have come before us and all the women that continue to stand up and put their names forward and put themselves up as candidates, elected or not, and to go through that process of saying, I want to be a leader in my community, paved the way for young women like those who sat beside me in the ice cream shop, enjoying a conversation about the journey ahead for them. Parliament, at its very core, is underpinned by this notion of representation. We are a representative democracy. It is beholden then on the parties to ensure that the candidates that we put forward truly are representative to be part of that democracy. Women belong in all the places where decisions are made, as to sort of paraphrase and slightly misquote the very famous Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed away last year. They belong in local shires, local shire councils, state government, federal government, at executive levels, at CEO levels, and across all industries. This is particularly important in Western Australia, in which the Workplace Gender Data Equality Agency recently identified that WA still has the most significant gender pay gap, although that gap has closed slightly, with men out earning women by around $23,000 a year. Getting women into the high-paying industries like mining is key to achieving that goal. Having women in leadership that help facilitate and create that understanding around that information and that data is also really important. So here I'd like to note that WA Labor has been proactive in achieving this genuine representation and helping to address some of those issues. And as a result of the election of the 44th Parliament in Western Australia, we are now 45% women. 52% of the WA Labor caucus are women. 60% of the members of the Legislative Council are women. In the mover of our motion, we have the first South Sudanese woman elected to the Legislative Council in the Hon Ayor Makur Chuot. We also have the first Aboriginal woman to be elected as a member of the Legislative Council in the Honourable Rosie Sahana. We have the first Serbian woman elected to Parliament in the Honourable Klara Ondrić. We have achieved a comprehensive representation of culture, backgrounds, values, beliefs, professions and life experiences, all accepted, included and equally valued. That is democracy in action. That is genuine representation. It's a great achievement that WA Labor has laid bare and set the standard for. Which leads me to turn to the WA Liberals' achievement in terms of working towards parity. And I'd like to dedicate the same amount of time and attention that they have into achieving gender equality. I'm done.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. I give the call to the Honourable Alana McTiernan.
Thank you very much. And I really compliment the Honourable Ayor Makur Chuot